Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to the Tenpenny Files. I'm your host, Dr. Sherri Tenpenny. Here on the Tenpenny Files, we dive into vital and often controversial discussions on topics that will challenge what you've been told and reveal what's been hidden. These compelling conversations will make you think, spark debate, and hopefully inspire you to action. Join me here each day at 3 p.m. Eastern Time to hear from authors and documentary filmmakers who have something important to say, who have often been silenced or censored. Today's conversation is with Twila Brase, president and co-founder of Citizens Council for Health Freedom, a patient-centered policy organization established in Minnesota more than 20 years ago to protect patient and doctor freedom. Her 8-time award-winning book, Big Brother in the Exam Room, The Dangerous Truth About the Electronic Health Records, written in 2018, is more important and timely and accurate now than ever. Twila will be a regular monthly guest here on the Tenpenny Files, bringing us updates on topics such as the Real ID, Medicare Advantage, and other critically important healthcare topics in the news. Twila, welcome to the Tenpenny Files. Thank you for being here with us today. It's so lovely to see you again, and thank you for being a longtime host on all of our podcasts.
Well, as always, it is great to be here. Thank you so much.
Well, the Real ID is a super hot topic right now, and you've had a lot to say about urgently doing all we can to stop it. It has now become mandatory as of February 2026, or pay a $45 fine. Why are they imposing these coercive measures now?
Well, I think what they have discovered is that people they're not following the other steps that they have taken to try to get people to comply. So, they said on May 7th that it would be required and you wouldn't be able to fly. That's what Kristi Noem said. It was never true. But I think that was, she's Secretary of Homeland Security. I think that was her way of trying to get people to comply with something that is wholly unconstitutional. I don't think enough people did. I don't think that they have increased their numbers of Real ID enough. And so now they are sick and tired of waiting for us all to comply and give up our rights. And so they're pushing it. They're going to fine people. Now they call it a fee, but of course it really is a fine. It's a penalty for failing to have a Real ID or other acceptable identification. So a passport will work or a passport card will work. But if you don't have that, and you don't go through their new biometric scanning device, which is called the TSA Confirm.ID program. It's a new travel program, they call it. But it's really a device to take a biometric photo of you and then get your biometric information and then decide whether or not you can fly. So it's really, I think this is just, they're pressuring. They're pressuring the American people to do what they want the American people to do, even though it's against their constitutional rights.
Are they going to have, is it going to be the person where you check in your bag? That's the first check of the Real ID is when you check in your bag, show me your ID, please, is what they say. Is that the place where they're going to have the credit card terminal to charge you? Like, is United going to do this, or American or Delta? Are they going to be the ones that are going to be responsible? Or is TSA going to have their own, credit card terminals where you go through TSA security?
So I guess I'd like to say several things about this. It's not really clear. When they put out their notice about this on November 20th, all they could say was that there was going to be this modernized identity verification system. They didn't have a name for it, and they said there was an $18 fee. Well, 10 days later, on December 1st, they came out with a name for it, TSA Confirm.ID, and they said there'd be a $45 fee. Now, they haven't decided, or maybe they do know, but haven't said, but their idea is to try to get you to do this before you ever come to the airport. And one of the questions you should be asking is, well, then how are they going to verify that you're the one who did that, right? I mean, this is all just about penalizing the American public. And so we don't actually know whether it will be at baggage or whether it will be at the TSA checkpoint. But it's, sometimes it sounds like there's going to be a line they're going to put you in to go through this biometric screening. And where will that be? I don't know where that will be because they don't want to let you into the sterile part of the airport, which means that you pass through security. So I have no idea. And hopefully, by February 1st, when they want to have this thing implemented, hopefully by then, all sorts of action at the congressional level or the presidential level or even the state level will help to stymie their plans here.
Well, it's really unconstitutional, and you just recently commissioned a major constitutional legal analysis against the Real ID. What did the analysis reveal, and why is it a strong case that of what you found out so that we can take action now? Millions still don't even know that this is a serious problem. I was listening to it on the radio the other day. It's a Christian radio station that I listen to, and they were saying, oh, yeah, make sure you have your Real ID or you're going to pay a $45 fine. Please make sure that you have that. And I'm thinking, you have no idea what you are encouraging here. And millions still don't. What did your analysis find, the constitutional analysis of this?
So this was the analysis. It was done by the former Solicitor General of Louisiana. And he looked at the law itself, what was the history before the law, what went into the law, and what the law actually does. This is a 2005 federal law, the Real ID Act. It was slipped onto a must-pass national defense funding bill. It never had a hearing in the U.S. Senate. It never got attached to a conference committee. And so it was completely outside of the normal way of doing business. And so they just attached it to this bill, and there was debate on the floor of the Senate. But then, of course, it was a must-pass bill, and so everybody passed it. And so it didn't even have the proper channels. That was one of the things that he found out. He also said that this was a novel version, a novel form of coercion. In essence, what the department did through its rules is say that, yeah, you as a state do not have to comply with Real ID, but if you don't conform your state laws to the federal Real ID Act, we will not let your people fly. So it is a commandeering of the states. Essentially, the federal government has hijacked the state DMVs. The DMVs and the legislatures have agreed to this because of the threat that people will not be able to fly. And so he said it is a federal commandeering. He did make note of the fact that it was an unfunded mandate. The state had to do all of this. And at a certain point, I think in 2020 or something, they took away all federal funding. So now the state is completely in charge of paying the bill for this federal commandeering. And so this coercion is taking place on a regular basis now. What we hope to do is get this legal analysis into the hands of state attorneys general who are responsible for protecting the state against federal encroachment. So that is where we are hoping that this is going to help us. We are also putting it in the hands of state legislators, and we are working now with about legislators in about 10 states where they're either having bills that would repeal completely their conformance with this federal law, or it would add poison pills, making it difficult for the federal government to accomplish what they want. For instance, forbidding a biometric photo. And because, I think what your listeners may not understand about the Real ID is it's a federal ID. It is not a state driver's license with a star. It is a federal ID. And the federal government is allowing the states to use it as a state driver's license. They're allowing the states to let it keep looking like a state driver's license. But it really is a federal takeover of the state. It is a nationalization of identification. So they're nationalizing identification. But not only that, because of the biometric mandate, they are building a national facial recognition system. And they're moving to make it all digital. So if you're looking at, instances of where this is happening in the rest of the world, you can look to China where the phone, so by digital, it means they're going to put it on our phones and then have remote access to it. So they're digitize it, put it on our phones, have remote access to it. And so what they're really setting up here is the framework that can be used for a social credit system or a carbon credit system. And so, they'll know how much carbon you're, outputting, right? So by where you go, because it'll be surveillanceable. So yes.
That it's good to hear that about the 10 states. And even Senator Rand Paul has finally stepped up to the plate and introduced the Safeguarding Personal Information Act to fully repeal Real ID, the first repeal attempt in 20 years. Why is this bill so critical, and how can people get behind it and support it?
So he did have a bill in 2017, but he didn't really go after it. But now he is chair of Homeland Security Committee. So he has the power essentially to all but, defund the TSA, which is inside of the Department of Homeland Security. So now the bill doesn't have any co-sponsors yet, but we are going to Washington, D.C., where we will hope to change that. We'll also hope to get him to move forward on a public hearing about Real ID. I think that the $45 fee or fine might be able to help that because the angst of people around the nation should be great. When you think about this $45 fine, and then I'll go back to him, but I just think this is important to say. If you want to get a TSA pre-check, it's going to cost you about $85, and that $85 lasts for 5 years. If you want to get into global entry, another TSA travel program, it'll cost you $120 and it lasts for 5 years. This punitive program called TSA Confirm.ID, this will cost you $45 per 10-day travel trip. So if you dare to have a 2-week trip, you will pay it twice. And you will have to go through the process of being biometrically identified and screened, all of this. So it should really perturb you. And I think that might help him to move toward a public hearing on Real ID. And he can because he is chairman. He can do whatever he wants because he is chairman. And that's what we're going to encourage him to do. And I'm going to just ask all your listeners anywhere, to contact his office and say, thank you so much for your bill to repeal Real ID. Now, could you please hold a public hearing on it so that the American public can understand what this really is, the base of a huge national surveillance and tracking system?
Wow. Wow. That just absolutely blows me away. I mean, blows me away that they're going to change that. You mentioned when you were giving me information about the Safeguarding Personal Information Act, a coalition letter. What's the coalition letter about?
Oh, yes. We asked people from other organizations to sign on to our letter asking Senator Rand Paul to hold a hearing on the Real ID Act. And that's another thing that should help to persuade him that this is what has to happen. We had 34 different organizations sign on to that letter. And then we also had 41 state legislators from around the country. So this went in, I believe, I think we mailed it on November 6th, or we emailed it on November 6th, to try to get him to do that. And we know he got it because we know that his Homeland Security staffer contacted us and said, thank you, I've got it. So we know he has it. Now, the real question is, will he act? Because it won't be popular. And he won't be popular in the government because almost everybody in the government, like most people in the United States, thinks that this is going to stop illegal immigration and terrorists, and it won't do any of the sort. And that is one thing that our legal analysis pointed out. First of all, 19 states give illegal aliens driver's licenses. It's not going to keep illegals out of our state. And then there's a whole bunch of them who are giving them social security numbers as well. And then, of course, maybe you heard that in New York gave an illegal a Real ID. And it says the first name, and then for the last name, it says no name or no name disclosed. A Real ID. right? So this is not going to stop terrorists. And then, of course, clearly with what's happening in our country, you can see that we're going to have homegrown terrorists. They're all going to be perfectly verifiable as Americans or as green card holders or whatever, right? Just the fact that you can verify who they are is not going to keep them from terrorist activities. This is all about a digital cage around the American people, controlling everything. And it's not just flight, because the Real ID Act itself says that the Secretary of Homeland Security can expand the number of required uses. It says that official purposes of the Real ID are for three things, and that is access to federal buildings, access to nuclear facilities, access to commercial flight, and any other purpose that the secretary shall determine. The sky is the limit. So it could be access to healthcare to make sure that there's no fraud, right? Access to banking to see, well, who's really banking. So there might be all sorts of things you will not be able to do if you do not have a real ID, which means you do not have a federal identification card. So the states are no longer in power under the Real ID Act. The federal government has taken over power over all of the states, all identification and all activities in all of the states through the Real ID. This is why we have a special page, refuserealid.org, refuserealid.org. We ask people to turn back in their real IDs, help to thwart this entire effort, go get a standard state driver's license. And then at the bottom of refuserealid.org, you'll see a map in various colors of red. And that's when you can register that you have given back the Real ID and got yourself a state driver's license. And we encourage you to not wait until renewal. Do it as soon as possible, because there are rogue DMV agents, rogue DMV agencies who, even if you have the right in law to have a choice between Real ID and a standard state driver's license, some of them, like in Indiana, aren't letting you go back. So we have had stories of people having no problem whatsoever making the switch, and then stories of other people being told, nope, once you have a Real ID, we won't let you switch back, even though the law doesn't allow them to do that. They've just made that decision.
But what does that mean in practice then, Twila? I mean, what does that really mean if you travel a lot, if you travel for your job or, for whatever reasons, that if you're not going to be allowed on a plane and they're not going to accept passports and the 16 other ways that you've outlined on other shows that we've done together, the 16 other forms of identification, like a military ID and a passport and all that, if they're not going to let you on the plane, what does that mean in practice?
They are going to let you on the plane. They are still going to let you on the plane with those 16 identification cards. But at the top of their TSA page that just has those 16, it says, check back frequently because this list could change. So if they really want you to get a Real ID and nothing else, they would take away for internal flight. They would take away all those other options. I think they'd have a really hard time doing that. But the other thing is that in their own press releases and in the stories in the news, it makes it sound like if you don't have a Real ID, you will pay this $45 fine. The headline says this is an option, the $45 fine if you don't have an ID. In other words, it's an option if you want to fly. If you don't want to fly, you can give up that option, right? But it doesn't say anything like if you don't have a Real ID or other TSA acceptable identification. It does say it later in the story, but in the headline, it just says if you don't have a Real ID. So the pressure is on by this omission, by the headline omission. And lots of the news reporters have just taken that to say the same thing. They haven't talked about those other acceptable IDs. They haven't talked about the fact that a passport is good. So I would say everybody turn in your Real ID and get your passport card. really important, I think, to get the passport card. It's the same size as any other identification card, so you can carry it anywhere all the time. And when you travel, and so you don't have to think about losing your passport book and suddenly not being able to fly overseas if you need to. So I would get both of them at the same time. And if you have only one, you can get the other by just submitting a birth certificate when you ask for it.
In practice, what are all these biometric scans and on the mobile IDs and the facial geometry and the facial recognition? They're even talking about cataloging now people's gait, how they walk, if they have a limp or whatever they have, and that's part of your biometric data now. What are they doing with all this biometric data? And what is the dystopian future of all this biometric data look like?
Yeah. So they're building a biometric-based surveillance system. That's what they're building. Another way could say a facial recognition system, but a biometric-based national surveillance system means all sorts of biometrics, not just your facial geometry. But the Real ID, the requirement is a digital facial photo. But the rule for Real ID also says that that might not be the only biometric requirement in the future. So they could at some point require your thumbprint, your handprint, your fingerprints, your palm print, your iris scan. All of these things could be built into the digital Real ID, which is what their plan is. And the DMVs testified to Congress in December of 2023. And they said that their plan is to digitize the Real ID, put it on our phones, and have remote real-time access to it. Which means, of course, that the government can at any point shut it off and leave you without any identification, make you a non-person, unable to do anything, unable to go get money, unable to pass go, unable to anything you can think of for an ID. You wouldn't be able to do because you wouldn't have an ID and you would be considered a foreigner until proven otherwise. So I think, practically when you look at all these biometrics and you look at the company who's doing this for the TSA, that company is IDEMIA, IDEMIA, a French company whose goal is augmented authentication. They want there to be they don't want you to have to carry a card. They don't want you to have to carry a paper. They want your body to be your identifier. And they are making boatloads of money. The contract with the TSA is $46 million. I think that's a 5-year contract. IDEMIA has a contract with TSA plus 4 other federal agencies. The only thing they do is identification. So they are working with our government to build a biometric controlled surveillance system, identification system, whatever you want to call it. And this is where they're making their money. And this is how the digital net is being spread across America. And this is why individuals must do everything possible to stop the net. I would go as far as saying that since they want to move this digital ID to what is that called? The digital currency, central bank digital currency, that everybody should really start thinking of cash. Cash. And I think there should be bills that make sure that nobody can be driven out of cash. I think you have to start talking to your legislators about this because once they have digital identification and they have digital cash, they have you.
Exactly.
They can turn you off. They can turn your money off. They can turn everything off unless you submit. And they are looking, in some countries, they're really looking to be able to identify you by facial recognition and probably by gait recognition too, but all biometrics. The police are using these kind of systems in crowds. So they're taking it to crowds so they can find out who's in the crowd. And so they can have some idea of, even with all the biographical information that you have, and maybe all the places that you've traveled, which they can find because you're carrying your phone with you. They can sort of do, what do they call that? They can preview you and see if you might be headed towards crime. right? So real ID, we're a health policy organization, but I know it's going to be the Vax passport. I know it's going to be the one number for accessing your medical records. I know it's going to attach to a global ID across the world. And I know this is going to be data sharing of all sorts, from our behavior to our where we go in the world, to our any medical treatment, to anything we say in the exam room. And so Real ID must be stopped. And it's up to the American people contacting members of Congress, contacting Senator Paul, contacting the president, and contacting their state legislators and their AGs. Get these people to have words coming into them that say, you have to act. You have to protect us. We now know what Real ID it is. It isn't a state driver's license. It's a federal ID, usurping all states' rights, getting rid of the 10th Amendment, essentially. That's what it's doing.
The thing is it's not only a federal ID, it's a federal noose, because if they can apply it any way that they want, it will become even more dangerous. It seems just so, like you said, it's just a driver's license with a star on it, but it's really not.
Right.
So this is a good place to take a break, because it's a lot to digest and absorb. There's so much going on with all of this. We've been talking about this for a while, but it's reaching the point where we really have, everyone listening to this today and in the future really has to take action on stoptherealid.org is a good place for it to start. So hold that thought. We're going to take a short break to hear from our sponsors for AmericaOutloud.news. America Out Loud Talk Radio plays the Tenpenny Files on the iHeartRadio network daily at 3 p.m. Eastern Time. You can also listen to it on iHeartRadio and anywhere in the world using the media player on AmericaOutloud.news. If you've missed any of these great and important conversations on the Tenpenny Files, you can find them on Spotify, Pandora, Apple, TuneIn, iHeart Virtual Studio, and on my platform at drtenpenny.com. And we also post them on my Substack, which is drtenpenny.substack.com. Because there's so many great books, so many important topics, and so many really good documentaries with so little time to read and so little time to watch. This show is meant to maximize your time, jumpstart your interest, so that you can get a cliff note of more important details that you may have never thought of investigating before. So we are going to stop here for just a second. We've got a great message from our sponsors. Sit tight. We will be right back. Zeolite is a detox spray. We work specifically with a company called Touchstone Essentials. They are an incredible company. We've been working with them now for several years. And zeolite is a mineral that goes through your body like a one-way basket. It will clean out heavy metals such as arsenic and mercury, aluminum, cadmium, and it hooks onto those metals from a one-way perspective. So once it's bound, it goes out through your urine or your stools and doesn't get redeposited in other places. Everybody needs to have a detox product in their life, and this one is so easy to use and it's so safe. You can take it when you're pregnant, you can take it when you're nursing, you can give it to little children, you can even give it to infants, and quite frankly, I give it to my dog. I actually put a little bit of the zeolite in his water because until we all stop living in a toxic world, we all need to get some of those extra toxicities out. The heavy metals, the persistent organic pollutants, the things that are floating through the air, the different things that we come in touch with in our environment. And we are a big fan of zeolite from Touchstone Essentials. We've been a big fan of their products for several years. Go to drtenpenny.com/detox to get your first bottle of zeolite spray for $50 off.
Well, only when the government bows to the people will America become great again. This is Malcolm Out Loud here. Join me in pushing back against censorship, my fellow Americans. Right at the top of AmericaOutloud.news are the words: many voices, one freedom, united in the First Amendment. Now is our time, my fellow Americans. AmericaOutloud.news, liberty and justice for all.
Well, welcome back, everyone. You're listening to the Tenpenny Files. Today, our conversation is with Twila Brase, who will be bringing you monthly critical healthcare and health freedom information to the Tenpenny Files. In case you missed the first part of our show, let me tell you a little bit more about our guest. Twila Brase is the president and co-founder of Citizens Council for Health Freedom, which is cchf.org, a patient-centered policy organization established more than 20 years ago in Minnesota to protect patient and doctor freedom. She is an expert on so many topics, but one of her many accomplishments is leading the effort to publish a one-of-a-kind 2024 Medicare how-to guide that garnered over 1,000 downloads in just 6 weeks. She has been instrumental on leading the charge to stop the real ID, which is our topic for today. Her 8-time award-winning book, Big Brother in the Exam Room, The Dangerous Truth About Electronic Health Records, is more important today than ever. Twila, we've been talking about the deep issues of the real ID. How similar is the US Real ID rollout to what's going on in the UK right now of requiring a national ID to be employed?
Yes, so their card is called the Brit. Is it called the Brit card? Yeah, not the Brit ID. I think it's called the Brit card. And the head of England is saying that if they do not have this digital ID by January 1st, 2026, they will not be able to work. And I get a publication called Biometric Update, and that tells me about what's happening across the world when it comes to digital IDs. And so what you see with these nationalized identification systems is that there's really nothing that they can do unless they have this ID. And there have been stories out of India when they switched to a national digital ID card. There are people who actually starved to death because their ID did not compute in the system. It told them that they weren't who they said that they were, and they couldn't buy groceries, and so there are actual stories of real harm. And essentially it changes the relationship between you and the government, because unless you have your ID, you're a nobody. Unless you are registered with the federal government, you're a nobody. And so this is the importance of way back when it was our founders who said there will be 50 independent states, and the states gave only a certain amount of power to the federal government and put that power in the Constitution. And although the Congress has regularly transgressed it, we can see now how important that was, because now the federal government is intending to take over all 50 states and control all the people. So this is what's happening across the world, but we are not those other states. We're not those other countries. We're the only country with the Declaration of Independence and the United States Constitution, which gives us and says we, the people, are the government, for, by, and of the people. And so we cannot afford to follow other countries. We must at all costs stop the real ID.
CCHF is preparing model state bills to help legislatures to push back. What do these bills do, and how do they protect state sovereignty and citizens? And how can the citizens of each state get behind what you're doing and help?
Well, first of all, I would just say, send a quick email and get all of your neighbors or all of your family to send a quick email to your state senator and your state representative. Just say, stop the real ID. I know it's a federal ID. I know it's the federal government in charge of the states. I know it's a national identification program. It's up to you to stop it. So just raise awareness. And it's often said that if 5 letters come into a legislator, it grabs their attention. They know there's an issue broiling. And so I would say get as many people as you can to send that. Just come up with a tiny little letter and say, hey, send this to so-and-so, and here's the 2 email addresses that you need to send it, right? Get that started. The bills that are happening in the states are of several forms. One is just a complete, get us out of the Real ID program. We're going to repeal conformance. We're no longer going to conform as the state of X to the Federal Real ID Act. We're going to take ourselves out. Other ones say like there won't be any biometric photo, or there has to be maintained access to the state driver's license. That is not a real ID. The license that the federal government doesn't want you to have, that has to be maintained. So there are a variety of poison pills that are possible that we're working with legislators, and they have, they know their own legislature, they know their own state, and they know what will work best in their state. In the state of Maine, Laurel Libby, a Republican, got 5 Democrats on her bill. And it got into one hearing, and then they tabled it and sent it to a study committee, which is their attempt to, get rid of it. But what you see there is bipartisan support for getting rid of federal control over the state and federal control over your life.
It's really true what you said. I was at a seminar this summer at Polyface Farms in Virginia. It was put on by the Brownstone Institute. And the keynote speaker was Representative Thomas Massey. And he was so entertaining, such a great guy. And some of the things he said, he said, there are so many bills and the bills are so voluminous. And, when you're in Congress, you have a little bit of a silo of where your focus of interest is, even though you have to be involved with all of these other different topics. And he said, when they are on the House floor and they have to vote, they're all kind of talking to each other and saying, how many emails or phone calls did you get about this? How do your constituents lean on this? And so if they haven't had time on a particular issue to dig into it because they got a lot of issues that they are involved with, they're asking their fellow people in Congress, what's been the response to this? Have they been for it? Have most of your people been for it or against it? And that sways their particular vote. So what Twila's saying, it's so important to be sending these emails or making these phone calls to your 2 state senators and letting them know that you know what this is about and you're paying attention, and have 5 or 10 or 20 people, have your entire church do it. Everybody at your gym, the people in your yoga class. I mean, all of these different people, everybody needs to be making their voice known about this because it will help to move it forward. It's very, very important. And you said previously that there are 10 or 11 states that have already filed or drafted bills to reject the real ID. What does that mean on the federal level? If there are individual states that say, we're not doing this, how does that muck up their program?
Yes, well, in the state of Maine, I think it was the Secretary of State who was testifying on it and just talking about, well, okay, so you can repeal it, but that just means your people won't be able to fly. I don't believe that's true. As soon as you get an entire state, including the legislators in that state, perhaps, or you're looking at all their constituents, I'm telling you, it'll just be mayhem. It'll be mayhem. It won't be that, okay, well, people in Maine aren't allowed to fly. Okay, well, just one statement like that, and it will be mayhem. They will not be able to not let people in Maine fly, because Maine legislators will stand up, Maine members of Congress will stand up, Maine members of the U.S. Senate will stand up, the president will probably stand up, everybody will stand up, right? So that is just like a moot. That's moot. That point is moot. That will not happen. So once even one state stands up and says, yeah, we're not going to do it in our state, and they're just going to protect their people, they're going to tell people, this is how we're protecting you from the digital net. This is how we're protecting you from federal control over all of your life. We're going to stand up and lead the charge to stop Real ID in this country. If we can find that state, to do that, it'll change everything. If we can also find AGs to band together and tell President Trump, you have no authority to do this. This is the commandeering of the states, totally against the 10th Amendment. That you've got to rescind that rule. You've got to shut down your Homeland Security, their campaign to get everybody into the net. You've got to stop the TSA. You've got to, shut everything down that is related to Real ID. So there are several things that could just have a complete domino effect. But, a lot of the American people have still no idea what the Real ID is. They think it's harmless and it's going to take away everything.
And that's really, really true. And that's why we're doing these shows and why we'll have you back repeatedly, Twila, and why we will send this out all over social media. We'll give you the link. You can share it, move it everywhere, because people need to be educated, because once you know what you know, you can't unknow it. It's just the way that it is. You know, you've mentioned that there is a Refuse the Real ID convoy that is gearing up to take place. Is that getting traction? Is that really going to move forward? Is it going to be like the truckers across America, just like it was truckers across Canada?
Well, in our goals, there is a convoy. So if there is somebody listening to you now who has a truck or knows a trucker and is interested in this, contact us. Right now, we have one trucker from the East Coast who is going coast to coast with the Stop Real ID message, with a URL code, with some truth about the fact that it's a federal ID on his truck. But we are in the process of improving everything because it was a rush job. Now we're going to make something way more substantial on that truck that is completely unmissable. Because it's kind of small, relatively speaking, and he's already gotten questions at truck stops about it. But we don't want it to be as small as it is. We want it to be bigger, and he wants it to be bigger, and it'll be much more colorful. And that will capture attention, and maybe that will capture other truckers who want to say the same. Because like I said, most people think a real ID is a good thing. They think it's going to save our country, protect our country.
I think that more than thinking it's a good thing, I think they just don't have any idea. I honestly think what you said earlier about people just think it's a driver's license with a star on it. That that they said that now the new driver's licenses have to have a star on it in order to fly. And that's all the thought that they've given to it because they don't know any different. That's why the conversations that we're having here on the Tenpenny Files, and I know that you have at cchf.org all the time, is really important. Let's change gear. There's so many things we could talk about. We could be on here for 5 hours. There's so many things in the news to talk about, but let's change gears a little bit. You fought long and hard to let seniors opt out of Medicare without losing their Social Security, which is so important. It's why when you turn 65, why you are required to sign up for Medicare, so that you will be entitled to your Social Security when you choose to start taking it, whether it's at 65 or 68 or 70 or whatever it is. And how would the Retirement Freedom Act restore that to nearly 70 million Americans? I know that you thought really hard about this and you almost had it through in President Trump's first term. And I'm glad to see it's getting traction again in this term. Tell us about the Retirement Freedom Act.
Yes, I am going to do that. Can I just throw in before we leave Real ID, just where people can go and get engaged? It's refuserealid.org, refuserealid.org. So now onto the Retirement Freedom Act. Yeah, this is, I think as an organization, we specialize in a lot of hidden things and misunderstandings that come out of the government. Whether you want to call that disinformation or misinformation is up to you. But the fact of the matter is that the Clintons in 1993 tied Social Security and Medicare together, saying that you can't get your Social Security if you don't enroll in Medicare Part A. Now, there's no law about that. There's no rule. There was never public comment. They threw that into an operations manual, and it's been followed ever since. So it's wrong. It's like wrong, really, really wrong. And there was a lawsuit, and Kavanaugh in the appeals court at that time made a really bad decision, didn't even answer the question of the lawsuit. And then the Supreme Court refused to hear it. But the fact is, if you don't go into Medicare Part A, you will not only lose your Social Security, no, you will lose your access to your Social Security. If you're in it and you realize how it's rationing your life away and you have option to get secondary health insurance and you decide to leave Medicare, they will require you to pay back every dime you have received from Social Security or from Medicare. This again No law, no rule, just written in a manual. And so, yes, during Trump's first term, we got an executive order to split those two programs apart, but it happened right before COVID and it really got derailed. And then what we were hearing coming out of the agency about what kind of a regulation that would be to do that, we were not happy with that. So now we are back to the Retirement Freedom Act, which there's two ways. I mean, there's several ways, right? You can go with executive order, which we got from Trump, or you can go with legislation. The strongest is with legislation. And the Retirement Freedom Act is the right of Americans to opt out of Medicare without losing their Social Security benefits. It delinks the program. And then we, of course, we want to have real health insurance once you get out. That's another thing that we just asked President Trump to do. We're like, don't expand the subsidies. Use the pressure to tell Congress that they have to get rid of the prohibition on real health insurance and then make it for all ages. So the Retirement Freedom Act is authored by Gary Palmer in Alabama, and it's authored by Ted Cruz in Texas. And I believe the Senate bill might have a co-sponsor. The other one does not. And we are heading to Washington, D.C. to try to get co-sponsors for those bills and move them forward and get them to a hearing and get it to Trump's desk before he leaves this time. This should not be. It's unlawful for them to deny you access to your Social Security benefits if you won't enroll in Medicare. And Medicare is only 8 years left before it can only fund 89% of all bills. And I just know that some of your listeners are thinking, well, that's still quite a bills. There's quite a lot of the bills. But in 2022, if they would not have been 2022, if they would not have been able to fund 11% of all bills, that would have been $99.5 billion unfunded. How many people would have lost access to how many services at $99.5 billion? So that's what we're looking at. That's what we're looking at in Medicare. And there are reasons you should want to get out and you should want to have real health insurance, the affordable kind, not the health plan kind, the one that only pays for catastrophic coverage and it pays you. It's part of our 3C solution: cash, catastrophic coverage, and charity. That's how healthcare used to be, and it's how healthcare needs to be again.
Yeah, it's really, you think about that the Democrats shut down the government for 42 days over this discussion of healthcare, and they still have no solutions. And, we know that the exchanges were terrible and Obamacare is not funded, and it's just like a total mess. I'm just going to throw this out here as a question before we go on to the next thing, because we're running out of time here, and I want to make sure that you've got the final word on what you want to say. Are you familiar with the ABC codes?
I may be, but I haven't heard about them for a long time.
Yeah. Okay. Well, after the show, let's have just a quick conversation about that, because it's really, really important to what you're doing. One last thing, and then I'm going to give you the final word here. We've got about 3 minutes left. Well, why don't I just give you the final word so you could just say what you want to do. You've got about 3 to 4 minutes left on our show. And what you've said so articulately about the Real ID and about the Health Freedom Act. And I know, like I said, we could talk on for hours, because the amount of information that cchf.org is involved with and all the movement forward that you're doing is so important. So why don't you take the last 3 minutes or so in our show here today, Twila, and you just take the floor.
Well, first of all, I'm just going to clarify our website. It's cchfreedom.org.
Gosh,
CCH.
So sorry.
You'll get to a Chinese Catholic, a Chinese Christian organization at CCHF. So cchfreedom.org is where they can get more information. I think one of the most important things to know now is that we sent a letter to President Trump. And we told him, and I need your people to tell him. And there is on our website, there is an action alert. And you can find the telephone numbers for the White House. I tried this 9 o'clock at night. So it was 10 o'clock in DC. And the one is a comment line and the other one has a live person. And it did at 10 o'clock p.m. in Washington, DC. Hello, this is the White House. How can I help you? So you need to get this message to President Trump that he must not extend the subsidies. The subsidies from the left is looking at getting to socialized medicine subsidy program by subsidy program. This would add an additional 24 million people onto government-run healthcare. They want to get everyone on government healthcare. He must say no to that. And he must say yes to getting rid of the prohibition against catastrophic coverage. We should all have access to major medical indemnity policies that cost so little, are only for catastrophes, and then pay us when we actually have a catastrophe. But the Affordable Care Act says we can't have those. And it's his time now to tell them, repeal that prohibition. So we sent a letter to Trump. It's on our website at cchfreedom.org, as well as our ideas, our recommendations for his consideration, including our 3C solution, cash, catastrophic coverage, and charity, and 12 recommendations to move the entire country back to real health freedom. So I guess that's what I would say. Go to our website, cchfreedom.org, look at our letter to Trump, see our recommendations, do everything possible to send them to podcasters and anybody else who's looking for a solution for healthcare. Because I do believe that we have it. It's patient-centered, privacy-focused, and free market-driven.
Wow, that was a mouthful.
You asked.
And you just nailed it. It's so true. I mean, everything that they're doing. And while you're there, they are a nonprofit organization. Make a donation to them. It's year-end contributions. You can make a donation to them to support all the massive work that they're doing, and sign up for their email alerts so that you can see the things that they're doing. You can listen to Twila on her radio shows, her little medical minute things that she does. I mean, she is just kind of out there and just kind of everywhere. And I think that what they are doing deserves our support. So at this time of year, it's the end of year, we're making charitable contributions, you're, shoring up your tax returns and all that stuff, giving your contributions to cchfreedom.org. And I'm sure you've got a donate button on the front of the website, right, Twila?
Absolutely. Yes, that would be wonderful. Thank you so much. Yes.
Well, they are, I've known Twila a really long time. She's been a guest on my shows, the Tenpenny podcast and now the Tenpenny Files for several years, and the amount of work that they do, and they get traction, and they actually, it's not just talk. I mean, there really are successful things that they're actually doing. So with that, we're going to have to close out for today. I know we could talk on for another couple of hours because there are so many other things that Citizens Council for Health Freedom is involved with. But we will have her back again next month to give us more updates about what's been going on and get active to stop this real ID. I personally, and this is just my personal opinion, isn't anything that any relationship to what Twila has said, but it's my personal opinion that when you collate all of these biometric data and all these things, we are headed towards the mark of the beast. They're not going to want you to carry a little thing in your pocket. They'll just put a little chip underneath your hand, so it'll be just really convenient for you to turn you on and turn you off, and you're in terms of access to all the things that you want to do. So we must get involved and get this stopped. So with that, I'm going to close out with one of my favorite verses from the Bible. I close every one of my podcasts with this, whether it is live or pre-recorded, which is Romans 12:12. Rejoice in hope, be patient in trouble, and be persistent in prayer. Remember to lean into God, trust him for everything. He won't let you down. And we'll see you again the next time at 3 p.m. Eastern, right here at AmericaOutloud.news and iHeartRadio. You can also listen to our broadcasts anywhere in the world using the media player on AmericaOutloud.news. You can find our shows on your favorite podcast platforms, also so that you can listen to all the previous shows that we've done, which are great conversations about books and documentaries. You can find more about me at drtenpenny.com, where you can find my book, Zero Accountability in a Failed System. You can sign up for my Substack, which is every Saturday, and you can sign up for my spiritual Substack, which is tenpennywalkwithgod.substack.com on Sunday. They are both free. I don't believe in paywalls. If I'm going to spend the time to write it, I want you to read it, but donations are always welcome. So with that, we want to thank everybody for being here. We'll have a great rest of your day. We'll see you here tomorrow or the next time, right here on the Tenpenny Files. Goodbye and God bless.